Christmas morning, 2023. I watched my father hand my sister Jessica the keys to a brand new Honda Civic, while I received a $21 Target gift card with a wrinkled receipt still attached. I forced a smile as my mother Sarah looked away in embarrassment, and my father Dale explained the car was for Jessica's nursing school commute. I thanked him politely, pocketed the card, and excused myself to the bathroom where I stared at my reflection, remembering every birthday, graduation, and achievement that went unnoticed, while Jessica received lavish celebrations. The drive back to my apartment felt longer than usual, even though it only took 15 minutes in my 12-year-old Ford Focus. The engine made that familiar rattling sound at red lights, a reminder that I'd been putting off a repair I couldn't afford. I kept the radio off, needing silence to process what had just happened. My name is Conway, and I'm 28 years old. That Christmas morning wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a pattern that had defined my entire relationship with my family. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, a modest collection of two-story buildings in the older part of town. My unit was a small one-bedroom on the ground floor, furnished with hand-me-down pieces and yard sale finds. As I climbed the stairs to my door, I couldn't stop thinking about the sound of those car keys jingling in Jessica's hands. Inside my apartment, I set the gift card on my kitchen counter, next to a pile of bills. The contrast wasn't lost on me. While Jessica, now 25, was unwrapping the title to a $20,000 vehicle, I was calculating whether I could afford both groceries and my electric bill this week. I sat on my thrift store couch and let my mind wander back through the years. Jessica had always been the golden child, though I'd convinced myself it was just because she was younger and needed more attention. But as I replayed memory after memory, the favoritism became undeniable. When Jessica graduated high school, our parents threw her a surprise party with 50 guests, catered food, and a professional photographer. They gave her a MacBook Pro and paid for her entire freshman year at State University. When I graduated high school 2 years earlier, I got a handshake and a $50 bill. My father missed my graduation ceremony because he was helping Jessica move into her dorm room early. I worked construction every summer during high school to save money for college. I remember coming home exhausted, covered in sawdust and concrete, while Jessica spent her summers at expensive camps and beach trips with friends. Our parents said work would build character for me, while Jessica needed to enjoy her youth. I ended up at community college, paying my own way through student loans and weekend jobs. Jessica got a full ride from our parents to a 4-year university. When she changed her major 3 times and took an extra year to graduate, they supported every decision. When I considered switching from accounting to engineering, my father told me I couldn't afford to waste time and money on dreams. The memories kept flowing. My 21st birthday dinner was at Applebee's with just my parents. Jessica's 21st was a weekend trip to Nashville, with 8 friends fully funded by mom and dad. When I made supervisor at the warehouse where I work, nobody mentioned it. When Jessica made Dean's List one semester, they sent announcements to the entire extended family. I walked to my kitchen and opened the refrigerator, staring at its meager contents. A half-gallon of milk, some leftover pizza, and a few bottles of water. I thought about Jessica's social media posts, always featuring expensive restaurants and boutique shopping trips. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Conway, I hope you weren't hurt by this morning. You know your father loves you both equally. I set the phone down without responding. The truth was, I'd stopped believing that years ago, but I'd never admitted it to myself until today. I pulled out a shoebox from my bedroom closet, filled with old family photos my grandmother had given me before she passed. As I flipped through them, something caught my attention. There were several bank statements mixed in with the photos documents I'd forgotten about. They were from my grandfather's estate when he died 5 years ago. My heart started racing as I read through the papers. According to these documents, my grandfather had left me an inheritance of $15,000, specifically designated for my education. I read the will excerpt 3 times to make sure I wasn't mistaken. The money was supposed to come to me when I turned 21, but I'd never received any inheritance money. When I asked my parents about it at the time, they said grandfather's debts had consumed most of his estate. Looking at these papers now, I realized they had lied to me. The inheritance wasn't just mentioned in the will. There were bank transfer records showing the money had been moved from grandfather's account to my father's account, then immediately transferred again to something labeled Education Fund Jr. Jessica's initials were JR for Jessica Rose. My grandfather's money intended for my education had paid for Jessica's college expenses. I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by the scattered papers, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only had my family treated me as an afterthought, they'd actively stolen from me to fund Jessica's privileged lifestyle. The worst part was realizing how many sacrifices I'd made that were completely unnecessary. I'd worked 2 jobs through college, lived on ramen noodles, and graduated with $30,000 in student debt. Meanwhile, Jessica lived in a sorority house and graduated debt-free, funded by money that was rightfully mine. I thought about all the times I'd sent money home to help with family expenses. Every month for the past 3 years, I'd contributed $200 to help my parents with what they called unexpected costs. I'd assumed they were struggling financially and felt obligated to help as their son. Now I wondered what else they'd been lying about. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to downtown to visit Mr. Thompson, the family attorney, who had handled my grandfather's estate. I'd met him briefly at the funeral, but we'd never spoken about financial matters. His office was in an old brick building with creaking floors and dusty law books lining every wall. Mr. Thompson was in his 70s, with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. When I explained why I was there, his expression grew uncomfortable. "Conway, I was wondering when you might come asking about this," he said, pulling a thick file from his cabinet. "Your grandfather was very specific about his wishes regarding that money." He opened the file and showed me the original will. My grandfather had written a personal note attached to the inheritance clause for Conway's education. He has the determination to make something of himself, and this money will help him achieve his dreams without the burden of debt. Mr. Thompson explained that my father had come to his office 6 months after the funeral, bringing my mother with him. Dale had convinced the attorney that I wasn't planning to pursue higher education and that Jessica showed more academic promise. He'd presented forged documents suggesting I had agreed to redirect the inheritance to Jessica's education fund. "I should have required your signature," Mr. Thompson admitted. "Your father was very persuasive, and your mother backed up his story. They said you were focused on working and didn't want college debt, while Jessica was academically gifted and would put the money to better use." I felt nauseous hearing how easily they'd manipulated the situation. Did my grandfather know Jessica at all? He mentioned her a few times, but honestly, Conway, you were the one he talked about constantly. He was proud of your work ethic and worried about how you'd afford college. This inheritance was his way of giving you the same opportunities your parents gave Jessica. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. My grandfather had tried to level the playing field, and my parents had used his love for me to further tilt it in Jessica's favor. I drove home and called my mother asking if I could come over to talk. She sounded nervous, but agreed. When I arrived at my childhood home, my father was at work, which gave me a chance to speak with her alone. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd done homework as a child, where I'd eaten countless meals, where Jessica had always been given the bigger piece of cake. My mother poured coffee with shaking hands. "Mom, I need to ask you about grandfather's inheritance." Sarah's face went pale immediately. She set down her coffee mug and stared at the table. "Conway, I've felt terrible about that for years." "Then why didn't you tell me?" She started crying quietly at first, then with heaving sobs that shook her whole body. "Your father convinced me that you were stronger than Jessica. He said you could make your own way in life, but Jessica needed more support. I believed him because I wanted to believe him." I reached across the table and took her hand. Despite my anger, I could see the guilt had been eating at her. "What else haven't you told me?" She looked up with red eyes. Conway, you've been paying for Jessica's car insurance and phone bill for 2 years. What do you mean? Remember when you started sending us money every month to help with family expenses? Your father told me you had volunteered to help Jessica with some of her bills. He said you wanted to support your sister while she was in school. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, I never volunteered to pay Jessica's bills. I thought I was helping you and Dad with household expenses. Dale has been taking your money and using it for Jessica's car insurance, phone bill, and credit card payments. He told me not to mention it because you wanted it to be a surprise for Jessica. He said you didn't want her to know the money was coming from you. I did quick math in my head. For 24 months, I'd sent $200. That was $4,800 of my money that had gone directly to supporting Jessica's comfortable lifestyle, while I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day to save money. Does Jessica know where the money comes from? No, she thinks your father and I pay all her bills. Dale told her not to worry about money while she was focusing on school. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of deception. Not only had they stolen my inheritance, they'd been stealing my monthly contributions for years. Jessica had no idea that her brother was subsidizing her lifestyle while struggling to pay his own bills. Mom, why didn't you question any of this? Sarah wiped her eyes with a tissue. I did question it at first, but Dale always had explanations. He said Jessica was fragile and needed protection from financial stress. He said you were capable and independent, but she required more guidance. After a while, I stopped asking questions because I was afraid of what I might learn. What do you mean? Conway, I've suspected for a long time that your father has been making financial decisions without telling me. Bills arrive that I don't recognize. Money disappears from our savings account. Jessica's expenses keep growing, but Dale always finds a way to cover them. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand tightly. I know we've wronged you terribly. I've been too weak to stand up to your father, and I've let him convince me that favoritism was somehow helping both of you. But watching you work so hard while Jessica takes everything for granted has been breaking my heart. I squeezed her hand back. Mom, I need to understand something. Do you and Dad actually need the money I send every month? She shook her head slowly. Conway, we haven't needed your money for years. Your father makes good money from his consulting work, and I have my part-time job at the library. We're comfortable financially. Another layer of deception. I'd been sacrificing my own financial stability to help parents who didn't need help, so they could funnel my money to a sister who didn't appreciate it. Mom, I have one more question. Jessica's new car, how much did that cost? Around $20,000. Dale said it was an early graduation gift and a safety investment since she'll be driving to clinical rotations. Where did the money come from? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Dale handled the finances for the car. He said he'd been saving for it. But I was beginning to suspect there was more to this story. Over the next few days, I found myself paying closer attention to Jessica's social media posts and lifestyle. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Jessica lived in a luxury apartment complex called The Pavilions, where rent started at $1,500 per month. Her apartment had granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, and a balcony overlooking the community pool. I knew this because she frequently posted photos from her living room, kitchen, and balcony. She worked part-time at a medical clinic, maybe 20 hours per week, earning around $12 per hour. That gave her roughly $240 weekly before taxes. Even with help from our parents, her lifestyle didn't match her income. I started documenting what I observed. Jessica's Instagram showed dinner at the Capitol Grill last Tuesday, which I knew cost at least $60 per person. On Friday, she posted photos from a spa day with friends that included massages and facials. Weekend posts featured shopping bags from Nordstrom Anthropologie and other expensive stores. She drove her new Honda Civic to trendy coffee shops, where she ordered specialty drinks costing $6 each. Her scrubs weren't the basic ones from Walmart that most nursing students wore. Hers were designer brands like Figs and Janu, that cost over $100 per set. But what really caught my attention was how she talked about our family to others. I decided to visit her at work one afternoon, ostensibly to congratulate her on the new car, but really to observe her environment. The medical clinic was upscale, serving wealthy patients in the suburban part of town. When I arrived, Jessica was behind the reception desk, talking with a coworker named Amanda. "Jessica, your family is so generous," Amanda was saying. "My parents wouldn't buy me a car like that unless I was dying." Jessica laughed and flipped her hair. "Honestly, this car is nothing compared to what they usually do for Christmas. My dad owns several properties around town, and my parents have always been really supportive of my education." I stood frozen in the doorway, listening to my sister fabricate our family's financial situation. "Your brother seems sweet too," Amanda continued. "Didn't you say he's in business?" Conway: "He's okay, I guess. He works at some warehouse doing manual labor. He never really applied himself in school like I did. My parents always said I was the academic one in the family." She said this with a dismissive tone that made clear she looked down on my work. The same work that had been funding her car insurance and phone bill for 2 years. When Jessica finally noticed me standing there, her expression shifted to mild annoyance. "Conway, what are you doing here? I wanted to congratulate you on the car and see where you work." She gave me a quick tour of the clinic, introducing me to her co-workers as my brother, who works in logistics. She made it sound more impressive than it was, but I could tell she was embarrassed by the association. After the tour, we sat in her car in the parking lot. The new car smell was overwhelming, and the leather seats were pristine. I thought about the duct tape holding my driver's seat together. "Jessica, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you know how Mom and Dad afford all this? Your apartment, car, school? Everything?" She looked at me like I'd asked something obvious. "Dad's business does really well, and Mom has her job. They've always been good with money." "What about the monthly money I send them?" Jessica looked confused. "What money?" "I send Mom and Dad $200 every month to help with family expenses." "Conway, that's really sweet of you, but they don't need your money. We're not poor." She had no idea that my money was directly funding her lifestyle. In her mind, everything she received was coming from our parents' success, not her brother's sacrifice. "Jessica, do you know anything about grandfather's inheritance?" "What inheritance? Grandfather didn't have any money when he died." Another lie she'd been told and believed without question. I wanted to tell her everything right then, but I realized it wouldn't accomplish anything. Jessica had been raised to expect constant support without questioning where it came from. She'd been shielded from financial responsibility her entire life. "Jessica, what are your plans after graduation?" "Well, Dad said he'd help me with a down payment on a house once I get a full-time nursing job. And I'm thinking about taking a trip to Europe this summer before starting work. I've never been overseas." "How much would that cost?" "Around $5,000 for a good trip. But Dad said family experiences are important investments." I sat in her luxury car, listening to her plan another expensive adventure, funded by our parents' manipulation of family resources, and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about enabling behavior that was turning my sister into someone who believed she deserved everything without earning anything. That evening, I followed Jessica and her boyfriend Marcus to dinner at Romano's Macaroni Grill. I sat several tables away, close enough to overhear their conversation. Marcus was a nice-looking guy, probably around Jessica's age, wearing an expensive button-down shirt and designer jeans. They ordered appetizers on trays, and wine running up a bill that probably exceeded my weekly grocery budget. "Your family has really set you up well," Marcus was saying. "The car the apartment school paid for. You're lucky to have such successful parents." "I know," Jessica replied. "Growing up, my parents always made sure I had opportunities. They said education was the most important investment they could make." "What about your brother Conway, right?" Jessica's expression soured slightly. "Conway's always been different. He never really had the same drive for success that I do. My parents tried to motivate him, but he was always more interested in working with his hands than using his brain. I gripped my water glass tighter, listening to her rewrite history. "He seems like a hard worker, though," Marcus said. "I guess. But there's a difference between working hard and working smart. My parents recognized early on that I had more potential for professional success." She was talking about me like I was a family disappointment, completely unaware that my lack of potential had been subsidizing her life of potential for years. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Jessica. "Conway, I wanted to thank you for visiting me at work today. It meant a lot." "Sure, Jess. I also wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you for building your own life. I know our parents sometimes seem to give me more attention, but it's only because they worry about me more. You've always been the strong one." The irony was suffocating. She thought she was being generous by acknowledging what she saw as minor favoritism, while completely oblivious to the systematic exploitation that had funded her independence. "Jess, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about what you want to give back to the family?" She was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Mom and Dad have invested so much in your education and future. Do you think about how you might support them when they're older, or help with family expenses?" "Conway, that's kind of a weird question. I'm still a student. I'm focused on building my career right now. Besides, Dad always says that successful children are the best investment parents can make. My success will be their reward." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling like I'd been talking to a stranger. The sister I'd grown up with had been replaced by someone who viewed family relationships as a one-way transaction, where she was perpetually the beneficiary. But the next day, I discovered something that made Jessica's entitled attitude seem like the least of my problems. 3 weeks after Christmas, my mother called me at work. I could tell immediately that she'd been crying. "Conway, can you come over tonight? Your father is working late, and I need to talk to you about something important." When I arrived at my childhood home, Sarah met me at the door with red, swollen eyes. She'd been crying for hours. "Mom, what's wrong?" She led me to the kitchen table where she'd spread out dozens of financial documents, bank statements, and legal papers. "Conway, your father has been lying to me about our finances. We're in serious trouble." I sat down and looked at the papers. What I saw made my blood run cold. Our family home, which I'd always believed was paid off, actually had a massive second mortgage of $90,000 that had been taken out 18 months ago. The monthly payments were $2,800, and according to the notices scattered across the table, my parents were 3 months behind. "Mom, how is this possible?" "Your father told me he was refinancing to get a better interest rate. I trusted him and signed the papers without reading them carefully. But this week, I started receiving calls from the mortgage company about missed payments." She showed me a foreclosure notice dated 5 days earlier. The bank was initiating proceedings to repossess the house unless the full amount of missed payments over $8,000 was paid within 30 days. Where did the $90,000 go? Sarah pulled out more documents. "That's what I've been trying to figure out. Dale has been hiding our financial situation from me for months. According to the bank records, $40,000 had gone to something called Riverside Restaurant Partners LLC. When I Googled the company, I found articles about a restaurant called Riverside Bistro that had opened and closed within 6 months last year. The business partners listed in the articles included Dale and his brother Frank. Dad invested in Uncle Frank's restaurant. Apparently so, and when it failed, we lost everything. But that was only part of the story. Another $20,000 had been withdrawn in cash over several months from various ATMs around town. The timestamps showed most of these withdrawals happening on weekday evenings and weekends. "Mom, do you know where Dad goes in the evenings when he says he has business meetings?" Sarah's face crumpled. "I found out yesterday. Conway, your father, has been gambling at the Riverboat Casino. I called them and spoke to someone in their customer service department. Dale has been a regular customer for over a year. The pieces were starting to fit together in the most horrifying way possible. My father had mortgaged the family home to fund a failed business venture with his irresponsible brother, then tried to recover the losses by gambling, which only made the debt worse. What about Dad's consulting work? Conway, your father lost his biggest client 8 months ago. His consulting income has dropped to maybe $800 per month. It's barely enough to cover our utilities and groceries. I looked at the credit card statements scattered across the table. There were 4 different cards, all maxed out, with a combined debt of $42,000. Minimum payments alone were over $1,000 monthly. Mom, how have you been making any payments at all? I've been using my library salary, which is only part-time. But Conway, there's something else. She pulled out a folder with my name on it. Inside were documents that made my heart stop. Your father forged your signature on a personal loan application 3 months ago. You're listed as a co-signer on a $20,000 loan from First National Bank. I stared at the paperwork in disbelief. My signature had been copied from old documents and pasted onto the loan application. According to these papers, I had agreed to be responsible for the debt if Dale defaulted on payments. Has he been making payments on this loan? He made the first payment, but he's missed the last 2. Conway, this loan was supposed to be for home improvements, but I think it went toward Jessica's car down payment. I felt physically sick. Not only had my father stolen my inheritance and been pocketing my monthly contributions, he'd forged my name on a $20,000 loan to buy Jessica a car, then defaulted on the payments. Mom, this means my credit has been damaged. I know. I'm so sorry, Conway. I only discovered all this yesterday when I went through Dale's desk, looking for tax documents. I pulled out my phone and called the credit reporting agency. After providing my information, I learned that my credit score had dropped by 150 points due to missed loan payments I'd never authorized. The loan default would make it nearly impossible for me to rent a new apartment, buy a car, or qualify for any legitimate credit. My father had destroyed my financial reputation to fund Jessica's lifestyle and his own gambling addiction. Mom, does Jessica know any of this? No, and Dale made me promise not to tell her. He said she needs to focus on school without worrying about family problems. Even in the midst of financial crisis, Jessica was being protected while I was being exploited. What's Dad's plan to fix this? Sarah laughed bitterly. He doesn't have a plan, Conway. Yesterday, when I confronted him with all this evidence, he just kept saying that his luck at the casino would turn around, or that Frank would pay him back from the restaurant investment, or that his consulting business would pick up. I studied the foreclosure timeline. Mom, how long do we have before you lose the house? 27 days to bring the mortgage current, or the bank takes possession. How much money would that take? $8,400 for the missed payments, plus monthly payments of $2,800 going forward. I looked around the kitchen where I'd grown up imagining my mother losing her home because of my father's selfishness and irresponsibility. Mom, what about your retirement savings? Dale cleaned out our retirement account 6 months ago for the restaurant investment. We have maybe $3,000 in savings total. The scope of destruction was staggering. My father had gambled away not only the family home and current income, but also my parents' entire financial future. Conway, I need to tell you something else. She pulled out her phone and showed me text messages from Jessica. Your sister has been asking your father for $3,000 for a spring break trip to Cancun with her nursing school friends. Dale promised he'd find a way to get her the money. I read the texts in amazement. Jessica wanted $3,000 for a vacation, while our parents were facing homelessness, and my father was actually considering ways to get it for her. Mom, what did you tell her? I haven't responded yet. Dale said he'd handle it. How does he plan to get $3,000? Sarah looked at me with an expression that made my stomach drop. Conway, I think your father is planning to ask you for money to save the house. And I think he's going to use some of that money for Jessica's trip. The betrayal was complete. My father was preparing to ask me to bail out the family from debts he'd created through lies, gambling, and favoritism, while simultaneously planning to use part of my money to send Jessica on vacation. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything I'd learned. My entire family dynamic had been built on systematic deception designed to elevate Jessica while exploiting me. And now, when the lies finally came crashing down, I was being positioned as the solution to problems I'd never created. My phone rang the next morning at 7:30. It was my father. "Conway, we need to talk." Dale's voice was different than I'd ever heard it before. The confident, authoritative tone that had characterized most of our conversations was replaced by something shaky and desperate. "Conway, can you meet me for coffee this morning? There's something important we need to discuss." "Dad, I already know about the house and the foreclosure. Mom told me everything." There was a long pause. "She wasn't supposed to involve you in this." "Dad, you forged my signature on a loan. I was already involved." Another pause. "Conway, that's part of what we need to discuss. Can you meet me at Denny's in an hour?" I arrived at Denny's to find my father looking like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. His hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He was sitting in a back booth, stirring coffee with trembling hands. "Conway, thank you for coming." I slid into the opposite seat without ordering anything. "Dad, before you say anything else, I need you to know that I'm aware of everything. The inheritance you stole, the money you've been taking from me for Jessica's bills, the forged loan, the gambling, the failed restaurant investment, everything." Dale's face went white. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. "I also know that Jessica has no idea about any of this, and that she's still asking you for money for a vacation while you're facing foreclosure." "Conway, I can explain all of this." "I'm not here for explanations, Dad. I'm here to listen to what you want from me." He took a shaky sip of coffee. "Conway, your mother and I are in a desperate situation. If we don't come up with $8,400 in the next 3 weeks, we'll lose the house. I understand that. I know I've made mistakes with money management, and I know there have been some irregularities with how family finances have been handled." Irregularities was an interesting way to describe theft and fraud, but I let him continue. "But Conway, despite everything that's happened, I'm still your father, and your mother is going to be homeless if we can't resolve the situation." He pulled out a piece of paper with numbers written on it. "I've calculated that if you could loan us $25,000, we could bring the mortgage current and have enough buffer to make payments for the next 6 months, while I rebuild my consulting business." I looked at the paper. His math assumed I had $25,000 available to loan, which I didn't. "Dad, where do you think I would get $25,000? "Conway, you've been working steadily for 10 years, and you live modestly. You must have savings, and with your good credit, you could probably qualify for a personal loan." The irony was staggering. My father wanted me to take out a loan to fix problems created by a loan he'd taken out in my name without permission, and he was praising credit that he'd actually destroyed. "Dad, what about Jessica contributing to this solution?" "Conway, Jessica is still a student. She doesn't have any savings, and it wouldn't be fair to burden her with adult financial responsibilities when she's trying to focus on her education." "But it's fair to burden me with adult financial responsibilities for problems I didn't create?" "Conway, you're in a different life stage. You have a career and income. Jessica is still building her foundation for the future. Dad, Jessica's foundation has been built with money you stole from me and my grandfather." Dale's face flushed red. "Conway, I understand you're angry about some of the financial decisions that have been made, but this isn't the time to relitigate the past. Your mother could lose her home. What's your plan for paying me back?" "Once my consulting business recovers and the casino situation stabilizes, I'll be able to start making regular payments. It might take a few years, but I'll pay back every dollar with interest." "The casino situation." Dale looked down at his coffee. "I know the gambling was a mistake, but I was trying to recover the money we lost on the restaurant. I had some bad luck, But my strategy is starting to pay off. I stared at him in disbelief. Dad, you're still gambling. Conway, I've developed a system that's been working. Last Tuesday, I won $600 playing blackjack. If I can just get a little ahead, I can stop gambling and use the winnings to help with the mortgage. He was delusional. My father was planning to continue gambling while asking me to fund his addiction. Dad, what about Jessica's trip to Cancun? He looked startled. What about it? She's asking you for $3,000 for a vacation. Are you planning to give it to her? Conway Jessica has been working hard in school, and she deserves some relaxation before starting her career. $3,000 isn't much in the context of $25,000. So you're planning to use my money to send Jessica on vacation while Mom faces foreclosure? Conway, it's not your money until you loan it to us, and Jessica's needs are separate from the mortgage situation. I sat back in the booth amazed by his ability to rationalize the situation. Dad, let me understand this correctly. You want me to take out a loan for $25,000 to fix problems created by your gambling and failed business investments. You plan to continue gambling in hopes of winning money to pay me back. And you're going to use part of the money I loan you to send Jessica on a trip to Mexico. Conway, you're making this sound worse than it is. How is it actually better? Dale leaned forward, and his voice became emotional. Conway, I know I haven't always been the perfect father, but we're family. Family takes care of each other during difficult times. Your mother raised you and supported you for 18 years. Don't you think you owe something back to the people who gave you life? It was manipulation wrapped in sentiment, but I could see the desperation behind it. What happens if I say no? Conway, I can't believe you would let your mother become homeless over money. Dad, I'm not the one who put Mom in this situation, but you're the only one who can fix it. We sat in silence for several minutes. Dale kept checking his phone, becoming increasingly agitated. Conway, I need an answer. The bank won't wait much longer. I'll need some time to think about this. How much time? A few days. Dale's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it, and his face brightened. Actually, Conway Jessica just texted me. She wants to talk about the Cancun trip tonight. I promised I'd have an answer for her about the money. Dad, you're going to tell Jessica you can get her $3,000 for vacation, while you're asking me for $25,000 to save Mom's house. Conway, these are separate issues. Jessica doesn't need to know about our temporary financial difficulties. She has enough stress with school. As I left Denny's, I realized my father wasn't just asking me for money. He was asking me to enable a system that had been destroying our family for years. If I gave him $25,000, Jessica would continue living in her fantasy world, where money appeared magically. Dale would continue gambling and making irresponsible decisions, and I would be financially crippled for years, paying off debt created by other people's choices. But if I said no, my mother would lose her home. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I spent 3 days preparing for what I knew would be the most important conversation of my life. Instead of responding to my father's desperate request immediately, I decided to document everything and consult with professionals who could help me understand my legal options. My first stop was the bank that had issued the fraudulent loan with my forged signature. I brought copies of all the documents my mother had shown me, along with examples of my real signature for comparison. The loan officer, Mrs. Henderson, was sympathetic, but explained that resolving identity theft cases could take months and require extensive documentation. Mr. Conway, you'll need to file a police report for fraud and work with our investigation department. In the meantime, the missed payments will continue to affect your credit score unless we can prove the signature was forged. I filed the police report that afternoon. Detective Martinez explained that forgery cases involving family members were complicated because prosecutors were often reluctant to pursue charges that would destroy family relationships. However, he said, having documented evidence of the forgery gives you leverage in negotiations with your family about resolving this situation. My next stop was a financial advisor, recommended by Mr. Thompson, the family attorney. Susan Walsh was a certified financial planner who specialized in helping people recover from family financial abuse. Conway, what you're describing is a pattern of financial exploitation that's unfortunately common in families where one child is designated as the responsible one, while another is treated as needing constant support. She helped me calculate the total amount of money that had been taken from me over the years. Between the stolen inheritance, the monthly payments that had gone to Jessica's bills, and the forged loan my family had cost me over $50,000. If you loan your father $25,000, you'll be enabling the continuation of this pattern. Your sister will never learn financial responsibility. Your father will continue making poor decisions, and you'll be trapped in a cycle of rescuing them from problems they create. But what about my mother losing her house? Conway, your mother is also a victim here, but she's also been complicit in allowing this situation to develop. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow natural consequences to occur. Susan helped me develop a plan for how to respond to my father's request in a way that would expose the truth to Jessica while protecting my own financial future. On Saturday morning, I called my father and asked if we could have a family dinner on Sunday to discuss the mortgage situation. I suggested that Jessica should be present since she was part of the family and deserved to know about important family matters. Conway, I don't think Jessica needs to be involved in this discussion. Dad, if you want my help, this conversation happens with the entire family present. Reluctantly, he agreed. Sunday afternoon, I arrived at my childhood home carrying a manila envelope and a small gift bag. My parents were already seated at the dining room table looking nervous. Jessica arrived 10 minutes later, fresh from what appeared to be another expensive shopping trip. "What's this about?" Jessica asked, settling into her chair. "Dad said you wanted to talk about some kind of family financial planning." "That's right, Jess. Dad asked me to help with a situation, and I think you should know about it since it affects all of us." I opened the manila envelope and spread out copies of all the financial documents my mother had shown me. The foreclosure notice, the credit card statements, the records of the failed restaurant investment, and the casino withdrawal receipts. Jessica looked confused. "What is all this?" "Jess, Mom and Dad are about to lose the house. They're 3 months behind on mortgage payments. They have over $40,000 in credit card debt, and Dad has been gambling at the casino, trying to recover money he lost on a failed business investment." Jessica's face went pale. She looked at our parents. "Is this true?" Dale started to speak, but I interrupted him. "Jess, there's more you need to know. The money I've been sending Mom and Dad every month for the past 2 years, it's been going to pay your car insurance and phone bill. You've been living on my income without knowing it." "What?" I pulled out the bank records, showing the transfers of my monthly payments directly to accounts for Jessica's expenses. Also, the inheritance that grandfather left me for college. Mom and Dad used it to pay for your university expenses. $15,000 that was supposed to help me avoid student debt went to fund your education. Jessica looked at the documents, then at our parents. "Mom, is this true?" Sarah started crying and nodded. "And Jess, your new car. It was purchased with money from a loan that Dad took out using my forged signature. I'm legally responsible for $20,000 of debt I never authorized, and my credit score has been destroyed because Dad hasn't been making payments." I showed Jessica the loan documents with my father's attempt to copy my signature. Dale finally spoke up. "Conway, this isn't how I wanted to handle this conversation." "Dad, you've had years to handle this honestly. Now Jessica needs to understand the reality of our family's financial situation." I turned to Jessica, who looked like she was in shock. "Jess, Dad asked me to loan the family $25,000 to save the house, but he also promised you $3,000 for your Cancun trip. He was planning to use my money to send you on vacation while Mom faces foreclosure." "Is that true, Dad?" Dale couldn't meet her eyes. "Jessica, your trip and the mortgage are separate issues." I reached into the gift bag and pulled out an envelope which I slid across the table to my father. Dad, I've decided to give you everything I can afford to give toward the mortgage crisis. Dale's face lit up with relief. Conway, thank you. I knew you'd come through for family. Go ahead and open it. Dale tore open the envelope eagerly. Inside was a $21 Target gift card and a note that read, "For your mortgage payment. Same energy you gave me at Christmas." The room went completely silent. Conway, what is this supposed to mean? I looked around the table at my family. It means I'm done being the family ATM while being treated like the family disappointment. It means Jessica is going to learn what it's like to pay her own bills. And it means you're going to face the consequences of your gambling addiction and financial irresponsibility. I pulled out another envelope and handed it to Dale. This contains documentation of your fraud, including the forged loan application, the stolen inheritance, and the unauthorized use of my monthly contributions. I'm pursuing legal action to remove my name from the loan and recover the money you've stolen from me. Jessica found her voice. Conway, you're going to let Mom lose her house over this? Jess, I'm not the one who put Mom's house at risk, and I'm not going to enable Dad's addiction by giving him more money to gamble away. I stood up from the table. But I'm not abandoning Mom. I'll help her find an affordable apartment and get back on her feet. What I won't do is continue funding a system that exploits me while protecting you from reality. Jessica was crying now. Conway, I had no idea about any of this. I thought Mom and Dad were paying for everything themselves. I know you didn't, Jess. That's part of the problem. You've been raised to believe that financial support just appears without anyone making sacrifices. It's time for you to understand what your lifestyle has been costing other people. Dale slammed his hand on the table. Conway, you're destroying this family. No, Dad. You destroyed this family years ago with lies and favoritism and theft. I'm just refusing to keep enabling it. I headed toward the door, then turned back to address Jessica. Jess, if you want to save Mom's house, you can sell your car and contribute the money toward the mortgage. You can get a full-time job and help with monthly expenses. You can take responsibility for the financial crisis instead of expecting me to fix problems I didn't create. Conway, I can't just sell my car. I need it for school. Then you'll figure out what your priorities are, just like I've had to figure out mine. As I walked to my car, I could hear arguing voices from inside the house. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely. The hardest part was over, but the most important part was just beginning. The week following our family confrontation was the most difficult of my life, but also the most liberating. My phone rang constantly with calls from my parents, Jessica, and even relatives who had heard about the situation. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The legal proceedings moved quickly once I provided documentation of the fraud. Mr. Thompson helped me file the necessary paperwork to contest the forged loan, and Detective Martinez confirmed that the evidence clearly showed identity theft. Within 10 days, the bank agreed to remove my name from the loan and restore my credit score in exchange for my cooperation in their investigation. My father was given a choice: face criminal charges for fraud, or accept responsibility for the full loan amount, and leave me out of any future financial disputes. He chose the latter, though not gracefully. The foreclosure proceeded as expected. My parents had 30 days to vacate the house they'd lived in for 15 years. Dale spent those 30 days alternating between rage at me for abandoning family and desperate attempts to find another solution that didn't require him to change his behavior. But the most surprising transformation came from Jessica. 3 days after our family meeting, Jessica called me while I was at work. Conway, can we meet for coffee? I've been doing a lot of thinking. We met at a small cafe near her apartment, the same area where I'd watched her spend money carelessly just weeks earlier. But this time, she looked different. No designer scrubs or expensive accessories. She was wearing regular jeans and a simple sweater. Conway, I need to apologize to you. Jess, you didn't know what was happening. That's not entirely true. She stirred her coffee nervously. I did know that our parents treated us differently. I knew you worked harder than me and got less recognition. I knew you lived modestly, while I had everything I wanted. I just convinced myself it was normal family dynamics, instead of questioning why. She pulled out her phone and showed me her banking app. I've been tracking my expenses for the past week. Do you know I spent over $800 last month on things I didn't actually need? Jessica, you don't have to change your entire lifestyle because of this situation. Yes, I do, Conway. Because my lifestyle has been built on lies and your sacrifice. That's not who I want to be. Over the following weeks, Jessica made changes that surprised everyone. She moved out of her luxury apartment and into a modest place with roommates cutting her rent in half. She sold her new Honda Civic and bought a reliable used Toyota, using the difference to help our mother with moving expenses. Most importantly, she got a full-time job at the hospital while continuing school part-time. It meant her graduation would be delayed by a year, but she was determined to support herself without help from anyone. Conway, I want to pay you back for the money that went to my bills over the past 2 years. Jess, that's not necessary. It is necessary. I can't build a real life on a foundation of other people's sacrifices. The most difficult conversations were with my mother. Sarah was devastated by losing her home, but she was also finally free from the financial chaos Dale had created. I helped her find a small apartment within her budget and assured her that I would continue our relationship, but on honest terms. Conway, I failed you as a mother, she said as we moved her belongings into her new place. I let your father convince me that favoritism was somehow helping both of you. I enabled his addiction and his lies because confronting the truth was harder than pretending everything was okay. Mom, you can't change the past, but you can make different choices going forward. Your father wants me to ask you to reconsider helping with his debts. What did you tell him? I told him that I'm done asking you to fix problems he created. If he wants a relationship with his son, he needs to earn it through changed behavior, not manipulation. Dale's transformation was slower and more grudging. He initially tried to blame me for the family's financial collapse, telling relatives that I had abandoned my parents in their time of need. But as the truth became known, his support system of enablers disappeared. The gambling addiction proved harder to address. Dale attended a few Gamblers Anonymous meetings, but quit when he was required to make amends to people he'd harmed. It took 6 months of continued financial consequences before he finally committed to serious treatment. The day he called to apologize was emotionally complicated for me. Conway, I've been working with a counselor, and I'm starting to understand how much damage I caused to our family. Dad, I appreciate you calling. I want you to know that I'm not asking for money or forgiveness or anything from you. I'm calling because my counselor says I need to take responsibility for my actions without expecting anything in return. It was the first conversation we'd had in months where he didn't want something from me. Conway, I stole from you. I lied to you. I damaged your credit. I exploited your love for family to fund my addiction and my favoritism toward Jessica. I understand if you never want a relationship with me again. Dad, I don't want revenge. I want honesty. I'm working on that. It's harder than I thought, to be honest, when you've been lying to yourself for years. 6 months after the confrontation, our family looked completely different. Jessica had become financially independent and was excelling in her full-time nursing job. She'd broken up with Marcus, realizing that her relationship had been based partly on the false image of wealth she'd projected. My mother was thriving in her smaller apartment and had started attending counseling to understand her role in enabling Dale's behavior. She'd also begun dating someone she met at the library, a retired teacher who appreciated her intelligence and kindness. Dale was living in a studio apartment and working 2 part-time jobs to pay his debts. He'd stopped gambling, but was still struggling with the underlying issues that had led to his destructive choices. And I had started my own small business using the inheritance money I'd recovered through the legal proceedings. Conway's landscaping was modest, but it was mine, built on my own work rather than family manipulation. The most meaningful change was in my relationship with Jessica. We'd developed genuine friendship based on mutual respect, rather than the twisted dynamic of privilege and resentment that had characterized our childhood. Conway. I've been thinking about something, Jessica said during one of our weekly coffee meetings. What's that? I want to understand what it was like for you growing up feeling like you had to earn love while I just received it automatically. It was a conversation I'd never expected to have with her. Jess, I don't need you to feel guilty about the past. I don't want to feel guilty. I want to understand. Because I'm starting to realize that the way our parents treated me didn't actually help me. Being shielded from consequences and responsibility made me weak, not strong. You're not weak now. No, but I had to learn strength the hard way after years of being taught that I deserve support without earning it. You learned strength early because you had to. In some ways, that was a gift, even though it wasn't fair. Over time, I realized that my family's financial crisis had forced all of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for years. The pain of that Christmas morning when I received a $21 gift card while Jessica got a car had been the catalyst for changes that ultimately made all of our lives more honest and healthier. Dale's addiction had required family enablement to continue. By refusing to enable him, I'd forced him to face consequences that led to recovery. Jessica's entitled attitude had been sustained by constant financial support. By withdrawing that support, I'd given her the opportunity to develop real independence and self-respect. And my own pattern of accepting mistreatment in the name of family loyalty had been broken by finally standing up for my worth and dignity. The most important lesson I learned was that true family love isn't about equal treatment, but about honest treatment. Enabling someone's destructive behavior isn't loving even if it feels easier in the short term. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is allow people to face the natural consequences of their choices, because that's how real growth and change become possible. Today, my relationship with my family is smaller but stronger. Jessica and I talk regularly and support each other through challenges. My mother and I have rebuilt our connection based on mutual respect rather than guilt. Even my father and I have slowly developed a cautious friendship as he's worked to change his behavior. But the most important relationship I've rebuilt is with myself. I learned that my worth isn't determined by how much I can sacrifice for others, and that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. That $21 Target gift card is framed on my office wall, now not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a reminder of the day I finally learned to value myself enough to demand honest treatment from the people who claim to love me. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of consequences, because that's how people learn to make better choices. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to stop enabling others' destructive behavior, even when it means short-term pain for everyone involved. Real family love isn't about rescuing people from the results of their choices. It's about supporting them while they learn to make better choices. There's a difference between helping someone and enabling someone, and learning that difference was the beginning of real healing for our family. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it? Did setting boundaries ultimately strengthen or weaken your family relationships? Please share your thoughts and experiences below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges and finding the courage to stand up for yourself. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family members who take advantage of their love. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice for others who don't appreciate it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach people to value what they have by allowing them to experience what it's like to lose it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.